The research shuttle had been drifting for 6 hours when Sam Cooper finally accepted that no rescue was coming. He sat alone in the damaged vessel, surrounded by broken equipment and flickering emergency lights. The attack had come without warning. One moment he had been running routine tests on mineral samples from the asteroid belt. The next moment, the ship had shaken violently, alarms had screamed, and everything had gone dark. Sam was 34 years old, an engineer from a small town outside Houston. He had joined the Deep Space Research Program 3 years ago, looking for adventure among the stars. Now he was looking at the cold reality of space travel. Sometimes, adventure found you in ways you never wanted. He checked the oxygen levels again. 4 hours remaining. The communication array was destroyed. The engine was dead. He was alone in the vast emptiness between worlds. Then he saw the ship. It appeared from nowhere, dropping out of faster-than-light travel like a predator emerging from tall grass. The vessel was massive, covered in sharp angles and dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Sam had never seen anything like it, and that fact alone told him everything he needed to know. This was not a human ship. The airlock hissed as something cut through it from outside. Sam grabbed the only weapon available, a metal tool from his repair kit, and backed against the far wall. His heart was pounding, but his hands remained steady. He had learned long ago that panic was the enemy of survival. The door fell inward, and they came through. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with scales covering their bodies like armor. Their eyes were yellow with black slits, and their mouths were filled with teeth designed for tearing flesh. They moved with the confidence of creatures who had never known defeat. The first one looked at Sam and made a sound that might have been laughter. Sam swung the metal tool with everything he had. It connected with the creature's arm and bounced off harmlessly, leaving not even a scratch on those thick scales. Before he could swing again, something hard struck the back of his head, and the world went dark. When Sam woke up, he was in a cage. The cell was small, barely large enough for him to stand. The walls were made of some kind of energy that hummed quietly and glowed with a faint blue light. Through the transparent barrier, he could see dozens of other cages stretching in both directions, each holding a different creature. He had never seen such variety in his life. There were beings with too many limbs, beings with no limbs at all, beings made of what looked like living crystal, and beings that seemed to be made of nothing but shadow. All of them shared the same look in their eyes. It was the look of creatures who had given up hope. A door opened somewhere, and heavy footsteps approached. One of the scaled creatures stopped in front of Sam's cage and studied him with those cold yellow eyes. "You are awake," it said. The words came from a small device attached to its chest, translating its hissing language into something Sam could understand. "Good. Commander Zythos wishes to see the new cargo." Sam said nothing. He simply watched and listened, filing away every detail. The creature's armor had gaps at the joints. The energy barrier flickered slightly every few seconds. The guards changed position in a pattern that seemed predictable. He was led through winding corridors to a large chamber where more of the scaled beings waited. At the center stood the largest one Sam had seen yet, with scales the color of dried blood and scars covering half its face. This, he assumed, was Commander Zythos. "This is the only survivor?" Zythos asked, circling Sam slowly. "This small, soft thing?" "Yes, Commander. The human was alone on the vessel." Zythos leaned close, and Sam could smell something like rotting meat on its breath. "Do you know who we are, human?" "No," Sam said quietly. "We are the Velthari. We have conquered 47 worlds. We have crushed empires and enslaved billions. We are the greatest hunters the galaxy has ever known." Zythos straightened and made that laughing sound again. "And you are nothing. A weak creature from a weak world. No claws, No scales, no venom. The slave markets will pay little for such a pitiful specimen. Sam remained silent, but inside his mind, he was processing everything. The Velthari were proud, that much was clear. They measured strength by physical traits, by claws and teeth and armor. They looked at Sam and saw only what was missing. They did not see what was there. Humans had evolved on a planet that wanted to kill them. The weather could freeze them or burn them. The animals could eat them or poison them. Disease, disaster, and death waited around every corner, and yet humans had not only survived, they had thrived. They had conquered their world not through strength or speed, but through something the Velthari could not measure. Humans could think, humans could plan, humans could wait, and most importantly, humans could endure. "Take him to the holding pens," Zythos ordered, already losing interest. "We arrive at Kethrix Prime in 3 cycles. He will be sold with the rest of the cargo." As the guards dragged Sam away, he did not struggle. He did not plead. He simply walked calmly between them, memorizing the route, counting the doors, noting which guards carried keys and which carried weapons. In his cell that night, surrounded by the quiet despair of 100 other prisoners, Sam Cooper began to plan. He thought about the stories his grandfather used to tell him, stories about surviving hard times. His grandfather had grown up poor, had worked his way through life with nothing but his hands and his mind. He had taught Sam that strength was not about muscles. It was about refusing to quit. "They can take everything from you," his grandfather had said once, "but they cannot take your will to survive. That belongs to you and you alone." Sam looked around at the other prisoners, at creatures from worlds he had never imagined, and he saw something familiar in their eyes. They were afraid, yes, but beneath the fear was something else. A tiny spark that had not yet been extinguished. They had all been told they were nothing. They had all been told they were weak. But Sam knew something the Velthari did not. Fire does not care how small the spark is. Given the right conditions, even the smallest flame can burn down an empire. Sam closed his eyes and let his body rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new observations, new opportunities. For now, he needed to recover his strength. The Velthari thought they had captured cargo. They had captured something far more dangerous. They had captured a human with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The slave pens of Kethrix Prime stretched for miles beneath the planet's surface. Sam had counted the steps as the guards marched him from the landing bay to his new cell. 2,347 steps. He memorized every turn, every door, every guard station along the way. The underground facility was a city of cages. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy lived here, waiting to be sold, waiting to be used, waiting to die. The air was thick with the smell of fear and desperation. Strange sounds echoed through the corridors at all hours, cries of pain and whispers of lost hope. Sam's cell was in a section reserved for what the Velthari called low-value merchandise. The other prisoners here were considered too small, too weak, or too broken to be worth much at auction. They sat in their cages with empty eyes, counting down the days until they were sold to work in mines or factories where life expectancy was measured in months rather than years. On his first night, Sam spoke to the creature in the cell next to his. It was a small being, barely 4 feet tall, with gray skin and large dark eyes. Its name was difficult to pronounce, so Sam simply called it Gray. "How long have you been here?" Sam asked. 17 cycles, Gray replied in a voice like rustling leaves. "I have seen many come. I have seen many go. None of them leave this place free. Has anyone ever tried to escape?" Gray made a sound that might have been a sad laugh. "Many have tried. The Velthari are too strong. Their weapons are too powerful. There is no escape from Kethrix Prime." Sam nodded but said nothing more. He had learned that the first step in solving any problem was understanding it completely. He needed to learn everything about this place before he could find its weaknesses. Over the next 2 days, Sam watched and listened. He learned that the facility was divided into sections based on the value of the slaves. The high-value section held warriors and skilled workers who would be sold to wealthy buyers. The low-value section held everyone else. Between them was a place the prisoners spoke of in frightened whispers, the Proving Grounds. On the 3rd day, Sam learned what the Proving Grounds were. Guards came to his cell at dawn. They did not explain where they were taking him. They simply bound his hands and dragged him through the corridors until they reached a massive circular chamber. The walls were lined with seats filled with Velthari spectators. In the center was a pit covered in sand that was stained dark with old blood. "Today's entertainment," a voice announced over speakers that crackled with static. "A new arrival from a previously unknown species. This human will face a Draxian warrior in single combat." The crowd cheered as a gate opened on the opposite side of the pit. The creature that emerged made Sam's heart skip a beat. The Draxian stood at least 8 feet tall. Its body was covered in thick muscle that rippled beneath dark purple skin. It had 4 arms, each ending in hands with fingers like knives. Its face was flat and expressionless, with small red eyes that burned with a simple, terrible hunger for violence. Sam's restraints were removed, and he was pushed into the pit. The sand was soft beneath his feet, and he could feel the dried blood between his toes. He had no weapon. He had no armor. He had only his body and his mind. "The human will not last 10 seconds, a Velthari guard laughed from the stands. The Draxian charged. Sam had expected speed, but the creature was faster than anything he had ever seen. He dove to the side at the last moment, and those knife-like fingers sliced through the air where his head had been. He rolled and came up running, putting distance between himself and the monster. The crowd booed. They wanted blood, not running. But Sam was not running away. He was running in circles. The Draxian chased him, swiping with those deadly arms again and again. Each time, Sam dodged at the last moment, taking glancing blows that tore his clothes and cut his skin but never landed solidly. He was not trying to win. He was trying to survive. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 3. The Draxian's movements began to slow. Its breathing became heavy and ragged. Sweat dripped from its purple skin, and its swings grew wild and uncontrolled. Sam had grown up in Texas, where summer temperatures could reach over 100 degrees. He had worked construction jobs in that heat, carrying heavy loads for hours at a time. He had run cross-country in high school, trained in the military before becoming an engineer. His body was built for endurance. The Draxian was not. Its species had evolved on a cool, wet world where physical confrontations were brief and explosive. It had never needed stamina because its prey had never lasted long enough to require it. But Sam was not normal prey. At the 4-minute mark, the Draxian fell to one knee, gasping for air. Its 4 arms hung limp at its sides. Its red eyes were glazed with exhaustion. Sam stopped running. His ribs ached where a blow had connected. Blood ran from cuts on his arms and face. Every breath hurt, but he was still standing. He walked slowly toward the fallen creature. The arena had gone completely silent. Every Velthari watched with wide eyes, unable to understand what they were seeing. The Draxian looked up at him with something that might have been respect, or fear, or both. Sam reached down and placed his hand on the creature's shoulder. He could have killed it. The rules of the pit surely demanded it. But he did not. "I am not your enemy," he said quietly, knowing the translation device would carry his words. "They are." He nodded toward the Velthari in the stands. "Remember that." The guards rushed into the pit to separate them, but the damage was done. Every prisoner watching had seen the same thing. A small, soft creature with no claws and no armor had outlasted a Draxian warrior, not through strength, but through sheer, stubborn refusal to fall. As they dragged Sam back to his cell, he passed by Commander Zathos, who stood in the shadows near the entrance. The Velthari leader said nothing, but his yellow eyes followed Sam with a new expression. It was not hatred. It was not anger. It was the first tiny seed of fear. That night, the whispers began. Prisoners who had not spoken in months began talking to each other. They spoke about the human who would not fall. They spoke about the look on the Draxian's face when it realized it could not win. They spoke about what it might mean for all of them. Sam lay in his cell and listened to the whispers spreading through the darkness. His body screamed with pain, but his mind was calm. The proving grounds had proven something today, not just to the Velthari, but to every prisoner on Kethric's prime. Hope was not dead. It was just waiting for the right spark. Word of Sam's survival spread through the slave pens faster than fire through dry grass. By the next morning, every prisoner on Kethric's prime knew the story. The human who refused to fall. The small creature who had outlasted a Draxian warrior. The prisoner who had shown mercy when he could have taken a life. Sam returned to his cell bruised and bleeding, but he did not rest. He began talking to his neighbors, learning their names, their stories, their skills. Gray, the small being in the next cell, turned out to be a former technician who had worked on starship engines before being captured. A tall insectoid 3 cells down named Click had been a communications expert on her home world. A massive creature called Gorn, who looked like a bear made of stone, had worked as a builder before the Velthari destroyed his planet. Each of them had something valuable. Not physical strength, but knowledge, skills, experience. Within a week, Sam had identified over 40 prisoners with useful abilities. He began connecting them, passing messages through whispers and gestures, building a network that the guards could not see. The first challenge was communication. The prisoners spoke dozens of different languages, and the translation devices only worked when guards were present. Sam solved this problem by creating a simple code based on hand movements. A fist meant danger, an open palm meant safe. Fingers held up indicated numbers. It was basic, but it worked. The second challenge was trust. Many prisoners had been betrayed before. They had learned that hope was dangerous, that reaching out to others only led to pain. Sam understood their fear. He did not push them. Instead, he showed them through his actions that he could be trusted. When a young prisoner named Lythe got sick, Sam gave up half his food rations to help her recover. When a guard beat an old creature for moving too slowly, Sam stepped between them and took the blows himself. When despair crept into the cells at night, Sam told stories about Earth, about humans who had overcome impossible odds, about ordinary people who had changed the world. Lythe became one of his closest allies. She was from a species called the Corvani, tall and thin with skin that glowed faintly in the dark. Her people had been enslaved for 3 generations. She had been born in chains and had never known freedom. But something in Sam's words reached her. "You speak of hope as if it is real," she said one night, her luminous eyes studying him through the barrier between their cells. "But hope does not break chains. Hope does not stop the guards. Hope is just a dream for fools." "Maybe," Sam admitted. "But dreams are where everything starts. Before anyone builds a house, they dream of a home. Before anyone wins a battle, they dream of victory. Hope is not the end. It is the beginning." Lythe was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "What would you have us do?" Sam smiled. It was the question he had been waiting for. He began to teach them. Not fighting, because most of them would never be able to match a Velthari in physical combat. Instead, he taught them thinking. He taught them to look at problems from different angles, to find weaknesses where others saw only strength, to turn their enemies' assumptions against them. The Velthari believe they are strong because they have claws and armor, Sam explained during one of their secret meetings, held in whispers during the brief moments when guards were not watching. But strength has many forms. The strongest chain can be broken if you find the weakest link. The tallest wall can fall if you remove the right stone. He assigned tasks based on each prisoner's skills. Gray studied the power systems that kept the energy barriers running. Click monitored guard communications and learned their rotation schedules. Gorn quietly tested the strength of walls and doors, identifying structural weaknesses. Others watched and listened, gathering information about everything from guard habits to the location of weapons storage. A former Velthari scientist named Calix joined their group in the third week. He had been imprisoned for speaking against the Empire, for suggesting that there might be better ways to live than conquest and slavery. The other Velthari considered him a traitor. The prisoners considered him valuable. Calix provided inside knowledge that no one else could offer. He knew how the facility was designed. He knew where the escape routes were hidden. He knew the codes that could disable alarms and open locked doors. "Why do you help us?" Sam asked him one night. "You were one of them." Calix's yellow eyes were filled with something like sadness. "I was born Velthari, but I never belonged among them. They worship power and cruelty. I have always believed there must be something more. When I saw you in the arena, refusing to kill when you could have, showing mercy to an enemy, I knew I had finally found what I was looking for." "What is that?" "A different way." As the weeks passed, Sam's network grew stronger. Prisoners who had once been strangers became allies. Allies became friends. And friends became something more powerful than any of them had imagined. They became a family. Sam taught them a human concept that the translator struggled to express. The word was solidarity, but the meaning went deeper than any single word could capture. It meant standing together. It meant fighting for each other. It meant believing that no one was truly alone as long as others cared about their fate. "On my world," Sam told them one night, "we have a saying. It is not the size of the dog in the fight. It is the size of the fight in the dog." "What is a dog?" Lyth asked. Sam laughed softly. "A dog is a small creature that humans keep as companions. They are not the strongest or the fastest animals, but they are loyal beyond measure. They will fight to protect those they love, no matter how big the enemy." Lyth nodded slowly. "I think I understand. We are the dogs." "We are the dogs," Sam agreed. "And the Velthari have no idea what is coming." By the end of the second month, Sam had a network of 53 prisoners spread throughout the facility. They had maps of every corridor, schedules of every guard rotation, and plans for every contingency. They had weapons hidden in secret places, stolen piece by piece over weeks of careful work. Most importantly, they had something the Velthari had spent generations trying to destroy. They had hope. And hope, as Sam had learned long ago, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The pieces were in place. The players were ready. All that remained was to wait for the right moment. That moment was coming soon. The night of the escape began with fire. At exactly 3 hours past midnight, a small explosion ripped through the waste processing plant on the eastern side of the facility. Flames shot up toward the ceiling and black smoke filled the corridors. Alarms screamed through the underground complex as guards rushed toward the source of the chaos. It was exactly what Sam had planned. Lyth and 3 other volunteers had started the fire. They knew they would be caught. They knew they would be punished. But they also knew that their sacrifice would create the opening their friends needed. As the guards dragged them away, Lyth looked back toward the holding cells and smiled. She had lived her entire life in chains. Tonight, She would help break the chains of others. Sam watched from his cell as the guards ran past, too focused on the emergency to pay attention to the prisoners. He counted the seconds in his head. 23, 24, 25. The power flickered. Gray had done his job perfectly. The small technician had spent weeks mapping the electrical systems of the facility, finding the exact points where a careful disruption could cause maximum chaos. Now the backup power that ran the cell barriers was struggling to keep up with the demands of the fire suppression system. "Now," Sam whispered. 53 prisoners moved as one. The weakened barriers fell easily. Gorn used his massive strength to tear through cell doors that had been secretly loosened over the past month. Click sent a burst of static through the guard communication system, creating confusion and blocking calls for reinforcement. Kylix led a team toward the security center, using his knowledge of Velthari codes to open doors that should have been impossible to breach. Sam ran through the darkened corridors with a group of 20 fighters. They were not heading for the shuttle bay, where the Velthari would expect them to go. They were heading somewhere far more important: the central power core. The facility was designed with many layers of security, but it had one critical weakness. The power core was the heart of everything. The barriers, the alarms, the weapons systems, the communications array, all of it drew power from a single massive generator buried deep beneath the ground. The Velthari had never bothered to protect it properly because they never imagined slaves would think to attack it. That was their mistake. Sam had spent countless hours listening to Kylix explain the facility's systems. He had memorized every detail, every pathway, every access point. Now that knowledge guided him through the darkness like a map, burned into his mind. They reached the power core in 7 minutes. 2 guards stood at the entrance, but they were looking the wrong way, watching for threats from the main corridors, not from the maintenance tunnels that Sam's team had crawled through. Gorn dealt with them quietly, and the group slipped inside. The core was a massive cylinder of pulsing energy, surrounded by control panels and monitoring equipment. Sam moved to the main console and began entering the commands that Kylix had taught him. Override, override, override. "What are you doing?" one of the prisoners asked, her voice trembling with fear and excitement. "Turning off the lights," Sam replied. He entered the final command, and the facility went dark. Complete darkness fell across the entire underground complex. The energy barriers that held thousands of prisoners disappeared. The alarms went silent. The automatic defense systems powered down. For the first time in generations, the slaves of Kethrix Prime were free to move. And move they did. What followed was not a battle. It was an awakening. Thousands of prisoners poured from their cells, guided by Sam's network of allies who had positioned themselves at key points throughout the facility. Some headed for the weapons storage, arming themselves with the tools of their captors. Others headed for the shuttle bay, preparing ships for escape. Still others blocked corridors and sealed doors, trapping Velthari guards in isolated pockets where they could not organize a response. Sam made his way to the central command hub, the nerve center of the entire facility. He expected heavy resistance, but the confusion had done its work. The few guards he encountered were disorganized and frightened, easy targets for the freed prisoners who followed him. He reached the command hub just as emergency power finally kicked in, bathing the room in dim red light. Standing in the center, surrounded by a handful of loyal guards, was Commander Zethos. The Velthari leader looked older than Sam remembered. His scales had lost their shine, and his eyes were wide with something Sam had never expected to see: fear. "You!" Zethos hissed, his voice filled with disbelief. "This is impossible! You are nothing! A weak creature from a weak world! How can you have done this?" Sam stepped forward, and the freed prisoners spread out behind him. They were a ragged army, wounded and weary, but they stood tall. In their hands were the weapons of their former masters. In their eyes was the fire of beings who had remembered what it meant to fight. "You made a mistake," Sam said calmly. "You looked at me and saw no claws. You saw no armor. You saw no fangs. And you thought I was weak." He raised the plasma rifle he had taken from a fallen guard and pointed it at the commander's chest. "But you missed something important. You missed what makes humans dangerous. It is not our bodies. It is not our weapons. It is what is inside our heads." Sam tapped his temple with one finger. "We think. We plan. We dream. And we never, ever give up." Zythos looked around at his fallen empire. The screens behind him showed chaos spreading through every level of the facility. Shuttles were launching. Prisoners were escaping. The system he had built over decades was crumbling in minutes. "What will you do now?" the commander asked. "Kill me? Take revenge for all the suffering we have caused?" Sam lowered his weapon. "No," he said. "Humans could have become like you. We had every reason to. We suffered. We fought. We conquered. But somewhere along the way, we learned that revenge only creates more pain. It does not heal wounds. It makes new ones." He turned to his followers. "Lock them up. Keep them safe. When this is over, there will be trials. There will be justice. But there will not be murder." Zythos stared at him with an expression of total confusion. In his entire life, he had never encountered mercy. He did not understand it. He could not comprehend why an enemy with every right to kill would choose not to. That confusion, Sam knew, was the beginning of something new. Not just for the Velthari, but for the entire galaxy. The uprising was complete, the slaves were free, and the human who had been taken as cargo had become something far greater. He had become a symbol of change. 3 years passed like fire across dry land. Sam Cooper stood on the bridge of a starship and watched the last Velthari stronghold burn. The planet below had been the heart of their empire, the place where their leaders had made decisions that affected billions of lives. Now it was surrounded by a fleet of ships crewed by former slaves, former victims, former nobodies who had risen to become something greater than anyone had ever imagined. The ship Sam commanded was called the Second Chance. It had once been a Velthari battlecruiser designed to spread fear across the stars. Now it carried a different message, a message of freedom, a message of hope. So much had changed since that night on Kethrix Prime. The liberation of the slave facility had been only the beginning. Word spread across the galaxy like lightning. A human had led a slave revolt. A human had defeated the Velthari. A human had shown mercy when revenge would have been so easy. Other slaves heard the stories and began to believe. If prisoners on Kethrix Prime could break their chains, why not prisoners on other worlds? If one small human could stand against an empire, why not others? Rebellions sparked across Velthari space. Some succeeded, some failed. But each one weakened the empire a little more, like water wearing away stone. What had seemed unbreakable began to crack. What had seemed eternal began to crumble. Sam did not lead every battle. He could not be everywhere at once. But he did something more important. He taught others to lead themselves. He traveled from world to world, sharing the lessons he had learned on Kethrix Prime. He spoke to crowds of freed slaves and told them that they were not worthless. They were not weak. They had power inside them that no chain could ever truly bind. Lith survived her punishment and became one of his most trusted commanders. Her people, the Corvani, had been slaves for 3 generations. Under her leadership, they reclaimed their home world and began rebuilding the culture that had almost been erased. She never forgot what Sam had taught her about hope. She passed those lessons on to her children and her grandchildren. Gorn became a builder again, but not of walls and structures. He built communities. He created places where former slaves could live together in peace, learning new skills, healing old wounds, discovering who they could be when they were no longer property. His gentle nature and quiet strength made him a natural leader, someone others trusted without question. Click established a communication network that connected freed worlds across the sector. Information that had once been controlled by the Velthari now flowed freely, carrying news of victories and defeats, warnings of danger and offers of help. The network became the nervous system of the growing rebellion, allowing scattered groups to coordinate like parts of a single body. Calyx, the Velthari scientist who had turned against his own people, worked tirelessly to change minds as well as systems. He traveled to worlds where the Velthari still held power, speaking to soldiers and civilians alike, challenging them to question everything they had been taught. Some listened, many did not. But those who did helped speed the Empire's collapse from within. Other humans joined the cause as word reached Earth of what Sam had done. Katie Marsh, a pilot who had been captured 6 months after Sam, became his tactical commander. She had a gift for seeing patterns in chaos, for finding paths through impossible situations. Danny Reeves, a scientist with a talent for understanding alien biology, developed methods to restrain captured Velthari without causing harm. They did not want to become the monsters they had fought against. That was the hardest lesson of all. Victory could corrupt as easily as defeat. Sam watched some of his allies struggle with the desire for revenge, the temptation to make the Velthari suffer as they had made others suffer. He understood the feeling. He had felt it himself in his darkest moments, but he knew that giving in to that darkness would destroy everything they had built. "We are better than they were," he said at a council meeting where some leaders demanded harsh punishment for captured enemies. "Not because we are stronger or smarter, but because we choose to be. Every time we show mercy, we prove that their way was wrong. Every time we treat our enemies with dignity, we show the galaxy that there is another path." Not everyone agreed. Some broke away, forming their own factions that pursued vengeance rather than justice. Sam let them go. He could not force people to follow his way. He could only show them a different choice and hope they would eventually see its value. The final battle came on a cold morning 3 years after the escape from Kethrix Prime. The Velthari Empire had shrunk to a handful of worlds, their fleets scattered, their leaders hiding behind ever-weakening defenses. The coalition of freed peoples had grown to include over 100 species, united not by conquest, but by shared purpose. Sam offered surrender terms that some considered too generous. The Velthari leaders would face trial for their crimes, but their people would not be enslaved or destroyed. They would be given the chance to build a new society, one based on cooperation rather than domination. Most of the Velthari accepted. They had seen the coalition grow while their own power faded. They had watched former slaves build thriving communities while their empire collapsed. Some had even begun to question the beliefs they had held their entire lives. Commander Zythos was among the last to surrender. He had escaped from Kethrix Prime during the chaos of the Liberation and had spent 3 years fighting to preserve what remained of his world. When he finally laid down his weapons, he looked at Sam with the same confusion he had shown on that night long ago. "I still do not understand," Zythos said. "You had every reason to destroy us. Why did you not?" Sam thought about the question for a long moment before answering. "Because destruction is easy. Building is hard. Anyone can tear things down. It takes real strength to create something better." He looked out at the stars, thinking of his home, the small town in Texas where he had grown up, the family he had left behind, the life that now seemed like a dream from another age. "You took me as cargo," Sam said quietly. "You saw a weak creature from a weak world. But you missed something important. Humans are not strong because of what we are. We are strong because of what we become when we have something worth fighting for." He turned back to his former captor. "Now you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life hating what you lost, or you can help build something new. The galaxy is changing. You can be part of that change, or you can be left behind." Zethos was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he nodded. Years later, historians would write about the human revolution, about the engineer from Houston who became a legend, about the spark that started a fire that changed everything. They would analyze the strategies and the battles, the alliances and the betrayals. But they would miss the most important part of the story. Sam Cooper had not freed the galaxy through strength or violence. He had freed it through something simpler and more powerful. He had believed in people when no one else did, and in the end, that was enough.